For professional advice with a personal touch, consult F.L. Fuller Landau, Chartered Professional Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
Good evening and welcome to today's Entrepreneur, a program about the entrepreneurial spirit that drives Quebec business. My name is Dan Delmar, along with F.L. Fuller Landau's Josh Miller. Hello, Josh.
Hello, Dan.
And this evening on the program, I'm excited to talk about PR. It's what I do during the day when I'm not here at CJAD.
It is you. It's a confrère. We won't call it a competitor. We'll call it confrère. You guys can share lots of stories and opinions, but it's a great story.
Yeah, Priya Chopra will join us from 1Milk2Sugars PR, and she'll be along in the next segment. But first, let's chat about some entrepreneurial news of the week. And it seems like Montreal is becoming all of a sudden kind of a luxury destination. We had a big announcement today from Carbon Leo, $250 million project to bring the Four Seasons Hotel to de la Montagne Street, right next to Ogilvy's. At the same time, Saks, which has expanded into Canada. There's a couple in Toronto. I noticed that recently. They are now going to open in downtown Montreal, and both of those projects set to be completed in 2018.
They are. Listen, Saks is going to be part of that, Hudson Bay conglomerate, and they're going to take space in that building as they renovate it and they, I guess, reinvent that part of it. It's an interesting concept. I think people out there think that Montreal is some type of untapped market. I don't know if I believe it necessarily. I mean, I don't know how many people are actually spending big dollars. I know we do get, the tourism that the city is banking on. Certainly, they're trying to fix the roads so that's a little bit better. They're going to improve areas like St. Catherine Street after they put a bubble over it for a little amount of time. I think it's also a question of, if you look elsewhere in Canada and North America, Montreal is a relatively cheap real estate market. It's not necessarily a cheap market, but if you compare it to a number of other places around North America or even in various parts of the globe, Montreal, there's a lot of people that still consider Montreal a great place to invest because it really can just go up. There's the threat of separation really isn't looming anymore. There's no real, the instability. You have little things here and there, but nothing major. So I believe that there's a lot of people in real estate development that do believe Montreal is still undervalued.
So your money can take you further here than it will in Toronto, of course.
I think so. I think the unknown and what I'm a little skeptical on is how quickly will that growth come. Great, you build something for 20 million, 250 million, whatever it is. What is the return on that? How is it going to be fed? Are there multiples that will survive it? You just don't know, because the Montreal community and the Montreal tourism, you never know what's going to happen with it.
When you look at sort of the changing face of downtown, there are a lot of skyscrapers going up, and it looks, especially along René Lévesque, it looks more downtowny than it has in my lifetime. Do you think there's a renewed sense for especially larger corporations to perhaps start building in downtown Montreal?
I'm not so sure that we're going to see a surge of headquarters coming back to Montreal from where they left to Toronto. There's no question. You speak with 95% of the people, and while they might not like Toronto as a city, it is the land of opportunity as compared to other places. Now, it depends what business you're in, where you have to conduct your business, and if you're successful, you can be successful anywhere. But you look at all these skyscrapers, all these buildings, and you kind of wonder, well, who's filling them? Yes, they talk about people coming into the urban areas. That there's an influx of people, whether it's from immigrants like external out of the country, or whether it's just suburbanites that are moving towards town, empty nesters or what have you. But you look at all these condo buildings, and I don't know how full they are of people actually occupying them. And I wonder what rules might come in the future of forcing people, if they're going to buy, to actually live in them or rent them or have some kind of close attachment and use throughout that. Not so sure that's going to happen, but some people may kick it around.
Over in the tech sector, we talk a lot about huge data loss cases, and Yahoo had one. 500 million user accounts stolen by hackers. I closed down my Yahoo Chat account when I was about 14, but for a lot of people, this is pretty problematic.
No, and this is kind of this is our twiddle notes for the week, our This Week in Data Loss. This is definitely, of all the ones that we've spoken about in the past, Dan, this is absolutely huge. And it just goes to show you really two things. One, nothing is safe. So, take what you can to that, take it with a grain of salt and protect where you can. But the other thing is, on two aspects. On the consumer front, we all joke about using the same password for everything. Just don't. And I might be as guilty as an ex or I used to be, but just don't. The flip side of that coin is consumers are increasingly weary of the sites they go to and the information that they enter into it to see what's safe or not. So this is a definite opportunity for some entrepreneurs to come in and really soup up their encryption or what have you. This is an opportunity for the people that already do it to really get out there and make sure that it's visible to everybody. It's kind of a buyer beware. Watch out when you enter information. Protect yourself as much as you can, but I don't know. There's a limit to how much you can protect yourself.
There's a program called FreshBooks, very popular, especially among startups in Canada. They are Canadian-based, and it's software. It's accounting software, basically, and it helps you run your business. They did something pretty bold. Well,
this is a story of you can never sit on your laurels. You can never just wait. You must always reinvent yourself. You must always stay with the times, and certainly as a technology company, yes, they do accounting, it's accounting software, but it's a technology company. You better stay up with the times. You better make sure, not only from a user interface, that it's but the back end has got to work out. Things change, transactions change throughout time. There's more e-commerce, there's more payment processors, there's more recognition software, whether it's invoice recognition or paper recognition. And if you don't keep up with the times and you don't change and move with it, you're going to be left in the dust, certainly in that sector. And FreshBooks, that Canadian gem, that's not RIM, it took it upon itself and say, hey, you know what? 18 months ago or not too long ago, they said, we better start changing. We better start getting ahead of the game instead of starting to be behind the game. So kudos to them, but it's a question of reinventing yourself, and it's a question of being ahead of the curve. Have that vision. Entrepreneurs, the right entrepreneurs, successful ones, have the vision. And that's I kudos to FreshBooks to realize that things do change, certainly the technology sector. That's an obvious point. But to actually recognize, do it, change it, and bring in, dozens and dozens of programmers to change it before it's even out there. I think it was released, the new version was released not too long ago, several months ago. And the report is that 90% of you had the option to go back to the classic version or not. 90% chose to keep the current one because it was, excuse the pun, fresh. So kudos to them.
Latest trend in HR, criminal background checks.
This is, you come back to due diligence. We've spoken a little bit due diligence in the past, and it's not just for mergers and acquisitions, but it's also about who are you in business with? Who are you in bed with, so to speak? Who are you going to let into your house and be responsible for your dollars and your customers? Certainly the banks. The banks have gone compliance nuts, partly because they hate bad PR, so they better make sure that they're transacting with the right people because the wrong people will just shut them down. And we've seen that with several banks in the past. But this is becoming an increasingly active business that is, well, let me put it this way. We were talking about information that you enter on the web, all of this online information. Well, the reality is there's trillions and trillions and trillions of bits of information that are all about you. And all it takes is for the right software and program to search the net and find the background. If it's becoming that much simpler to do, then why not do the background check and make sure that's all right? Why not check and make sure the person that you're going into business with is really legitimate? Because you never know.
You never know. Today's Entrepreneur on CJAD 800, we're going to talk about the business of public relations with Priya Chopra of 1Milk2Sugars coming up next on the show.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult FL Fuller Landau, Chartered Professional Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
Inspiring stories from outstanding business people. Dan Delmar and FL Fuller Landau's Josh Miller with you on today's Entrepreneur. And our guest this evening is Priya Chopra of 1Milk2Sugars PR. Priya, welcome to today's Entrepreneur.
Thank you.
So first question is the easiest. Tell us about 1Milk2Sugars.
1Milk2Sugars is a boutique PR and social media agency with offices in Montreal and Toronto, and we cater to all sorts of lifestyle brands.
Now, why lifestyles? Why did you choose that? I mean, there's so many products out there. Why choose that?
Well, I think you got to be passionate about what you're doing. So I've always had a passion and interest in fashion and beauty, even from a young age. I did my master's as well in fashion management, so it was just out of pure passion.
Now, when you were starting out, it started how long ago?
12 years now.
12 years. Wow. But it wasn't Montreal, Toronto all the way back then. It was just one location.
Yeah, a little shop here in Montreal on St. Catherine Street. We opened, I think we were about 500 square feet, not even, a small little space. Before that, we started out of our homes. So, that was the next step.
What were you doing before then? Like, what was the jump in or the lead into this? Why did you want to get into this business specifically?
I was unemployed at the time, so it was a good time as any. I had just come back from doing my master's. I had worked previously in corporate for a few years, and I figured, now's the time. I always felt that calling to start a business. I had explored several entrepreneurial type of things before, so I thought I'd give it a shot.
Now, 1Milk2Sugars, where does that come from?
Well, the philosophy behind the name is sort of, the way you take your coffee is so intricate, or your tea, what have you. So it's not cookie cutter. It's really tailored and customized programs that we present to our clients. So it's sort of that philosophy, how you take your coffee.
So basically cater to, and, it is case by case.
Case by case, exactly.
People often ask me, what is public relations? What's your answer to that question? Because not everyone really knows.
Yeah, it's such a good point. It's sort of the first thing I always ask. Even clients that knock on our doors sometimes don't really know what it is exactly, because we're behind the scenes. We're between the journalist and brands. So really conveying messages, key messages to media about brands on the brand's behalf. So communicating for them, guiding stories, partnerships with journalists, basically. And then, we also have social media. So now that that's kind of getting into the mix, that's another facet of the business. But on the PR side, yeah, that's it in a nutshell.
You didn't, when you started this out, were you on your own? Speaking of partnership, I think you started out with a few people, correct?
Yeah,
we did. 1Milk2Sugars was also a milk, which was my brother, and then 2Sugars were the ladies. So it was me and my best friend. So it was sort of like a family operation, if you will, when we started.
Excellent. And then eventually that went on to just become your own over a period of time?
We all have our own businesses successfully now. We split in 2009, which was sort of the recession period. So it was, not the best of times, but everyone went their own way. And I took my specialty, which was public relations.
Did you find it was maybe not easier, maybe just call it different, to be on your own and exercise your own vision versus working with partners?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it depends on the individual. For me, it works. It works really well because I'm really motivated every day. I'm consistent every day. So I felt by myself, I could channel my own energy, my own pace of work, and go for it.
Did you feel that you had a good ramp up speed when you kind of took this business on your own, or did you feel you had to kind of reinvent, especially after the recession?
Yeah, I think you're constantly reinventing with the times, be it internally or externally, with what's happening externally. But internally at the time, yeah, I think I had to restructure, I had to reinvent, reposition. We rebranded, created a new logo, new website, new offer, really saying no to certain services and just yes to really your core offer. So that was a big learning. You didn't have to say yes to everything that comes, knocking through the door, and really being true to what you do best. That was a key learning. But I think there was a lot of remodeling and reinventing that had to happen at that time. So,
and certainly as a PR company and events and all that, and marketing, do you practice what you preach? So when we come back after the break, we'll kind of talk about what marketing works for you, 1Milk2Sugars,
sure, then
and now.
More with Priya Chopra of 1Milk2Sugars on today's Entrepreneur on CJAD 800 after the break.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult FL Fuller Landau, Chartered Professional Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
Joining us tonight is Priya Chopra of 1Milk2Sugars PR. Here's a question that I might be taking notes on. PR is super stressful. How do you sort of convey to your team and to your organization that and to the client that everything's under control and nothing to panic about?
Yeah, it is. It's a always on kind of job. Even with social media, it's always on kind of job. And I think when you are also sort of in the middle of something, because with PR, as you know, you don't really have control on the final output. You do your best, you guide the message. What the journalist wishes to write about, they write about, or wishes to talk about, they talk about. So, thankfully, we haven't had any botched jobs in that way. But it is stressful because sometimes the expectations need to be aligned with the client. So there's a lot of expectation management, which is something that is a big thing I preach with the team. And I say that you have to manage expectations. And it's something that comes with time. It's difficult at first because you want to say yes, yes, yes all the time to please your client. But I think managing those expectations and being completely transparent and honest is the way you got to go.
Communication, you have no choice. And of course, stressful. I mean, everybody tries to balance life, whatever that means. And you kind of went through this raising a few children.
Just a few.
How was that like, when you first started, when you first took over on your own? What was that like as a I believe you were a young mother at the time?
Yeah, well, I think I'm still a young mother, I hope. Younger, of course. No, I think it was an amazing way to actually help me grow my business. And contrary to what women think when they have kids, that they're not able to grow a business. But for me, it was like a matter of delegation. So by having children, I just simply did not have the time that I had before. And I had to build a team. I had to delegate. I had to put, measures in place. So I think that taught me a lot. It taught me a lot in a positive way.
Did you ever have them in tow? Did you ever take them to client meetings?
Oh yeah. My mom used to
Did that work for you?
It did. And people are surprisingly, honestly, it's really wonderful. Really a lot of positive reception about mothers and motherhood. And I see it within my agency and, the clients we work with. And it's really nice to see that. Sometimes surprising too. But no, my kids came with me everywhere. When I opened my Toronto office, I had my son in tow. My mom would on the daily say, so where did the kids go today? Or where did you take Kian today or Jaya today? So, it was always something.
And I guess being in the lifestyles business, the fact that you're a female entrepreneur really doesn't hurt. It's not in that call it man's world. You run your own business.
It's true. Yeah, it's true. I haven't felt it that much. Maybe it's, by virtue of what industry I'm in, but I never think of being a woman in business. I'm just in business.
Now, what about competition? Do you look at your competitors and what they're doing? How much do you keep tabs on them?
Well, it's funny because I find as you grow, when you're growing is when you start to notice competition for the first time. It's kind of, blasé to say that, but I was really in my own little bubble before. And then all of a sudden when you're sort of growing and, coming, to get exposed and just hearing about other brands and brands hearing about you and your competitors, I sort of know who my main competitors are more and more. And I keep it in my mind, but I don't let it, I look forward. I don't look left and right too much, but yes, I am aware of who they are. And I think that I came to be more so as I was growing.
And like to the point where, I know you don't look left and right, but you kind of, it's a creative business. So you kind of want to see what else is out there in the marketplace. So I suspect, and Dan, you probably too, kind of look out there and see what's happening in the marketplace. Is it tough to keep up or to have that it's a inundation of information full time? How do you manage that?
It is. I think you take it with a grain of salt for sure. When you're really competitive as an entrepreneur, entrepreneurs are generally pretty competitive people. So when they see, somebody in their competitive milieu doing good or having done something, you might want to grind your teeth and wish you had the time or the means or wish you had done that first for sure. But you got to pat yourself on the back with the good things you're doing as well. So, and commend the team that you have in place that's also doing a great job for you.
No, and there's no question having the right team surround you,
Totally.
Especially as you're balancing the entrepreneur, you're balancing life, the kids, customers, all that. It's huge, and I'm sure to build a team. How many people are you today?
A little less than 15.
So there's no question there's a ramp up and understanding, and you're dealing with humans, so you gotta kind of have that understanding. From a marketing aspect, what was the first thing you did right out of the gate to try and bring in those first customers?
cold calls. By virtue, that was like the biggest character building experience. I think when you're starting a business that's new, it's not something your parents have passed down to you. It's something that, you're building. So it really takes a lot of grit. I did a lot of cold calling. For sure was the only measure in, the way that I could have done things back in the day, getting people to listen to you and, saying that you had a good service to offer them. So, try, test, and intrude. But now, thankfully, calls come in. So that's the biggest reward.
And I think that's great. So from a marketing aspect, you practice what you preach, and we'll hear more about what you've been doing that's been successful for 1Milk2Sugars on the marketing front, human resource front, etc. when we come back.
More with Priya Chopra of 1Milk2Sugars here on Today's Entrepreneur.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult FL Fuller Landau, Chartered Professional Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
Welcome back to Today's Entrepreneur, presented by FL Fuller Landau, a program about the entrepreneurial spirit that drives Quebec business. Dan Delmar, along with FL Fuller Landau's Josh Miller. And this evening, our guest is Priya Chopra of 1Milk2Sugars PR. And talking a little bit about marketing now, Priya, and this is obviously a challenge that I'm facing, I'm still facing. How do you market a marketing company?
It's a very good question. I was thinking earlier of that expression, cordonnier mal chaussé. So it's something that, you offer these services, but you don't often think to promote yourself. So you don't really practice what you preach. But lately, I have been. We have someone on staff that actually does PR for the agency. We have somebody who's actually contracted to do all of our social media. So I'm starting to really invest in these services. It's harder when you're offering such a niche service to a niche target. So mass advertising just doesn't work. So I'm really clear on what I'm looking for, and we do targeted types of events, speeches, conferences, interviews such as this. So it's like a needle in a haystack. It's a little bit difficult to get your target.
Is it important, or have you started to measure what you kind of put out there, measure your marketing campaigns?
That's the next step. I think measurement, again, I just started to invest in our own marketing campaigns, but we're always measuring for our clients because it's all about quantifying and delivering ROI. So I think, as an entrepreneur, you kind of know what works and what doesn't. Measurement, got to work on it.
Now, speaking of measurement, you're getting to this business. It's very creative. You got the creative side behind you, but you also have to run your business. You have to know your numbers. You have to understand them.
Yes.
Did it take you long to kind of ramp up and understand the kind of the business and the number side behind your operations?
Yeah, it's a great question because I'm so in that right now. I'm in that mode. And, often when people, say, hey, Priya, I need you to run this PR campaign for me. And I said, okay, that's great. I'm going to introduce you to an account manager that will run it because I'm simply not the person that's doing that anymore. I'm on the back end. So I sort of say I'm doing all the boring things right now, which is, looking at balance sheet, profit and loss statements, trying to understand my numbers, understand all of that, the financials, maybe HR, operations.
Was there a kind of tipping point that said, you know what, you better concentrate more on the business and a little bit less on, not that you don't move away from the customers, but maybe a little bit more focus and delegate those other matters?
Yeah, I think when you start to really invest in your business and you're really heavy into that, you're really in growth mode and you're putting in capital, you're really curious to see what the return is, as you were just saying. So I think that at that point, I would say in the last few years, I'm much more in tune with that aspect of the business.
And speaking of numbers, when you're starting out versus today, there's a pricing aspect that comes in, and it's a little bit of an intangible because you're selling kind of an image, a brand to your customers. How do you price it, or how did you price it then? Is it different today?
Yeah, I find it's really the $1 million question because comes down to it. It can make you win or lose an account. The pricing model based on your competitors, based on what your offer is, offering too little, too not enough. So it's always that question in your mind. I think I have a pretty good sense of the brackets in which we're operating right now because it's I think that helps to put yourself into tiers and different service offers, if you will. But it's difficult, and especially with services being intangible and offering services to multiple clients, it's a difficult matrix.
And of course, then because you're not just Montreal, you're in Toronto as well.
Yes.
Also two very different markets.
Oh, yes.
Does that mean the pricing, I guess, is also in two different markets?
You would think. I mean, there's something that the market can sustain within the industry, but I think for sure Toronto and Montreal costing is very different. I mean, even with regard to HR, even with regard to real estate, I mean, it's a completely new learning for me, and I was, just blown away by the differences between the two cities.
When did you open up the Toronto office?
When my second baby was about 6 months old, so it's been 4 years. 4 years now.
And what was the biggest learning curve, if you will? Was it cost? Was it?
Well, managing the business remotely, because I'm here. I live here, but I have a fully running office, in Toronto. So I think that trust, having the right people in place, not calling every day at 9 o'clock, checking if they're in the office. I mean, you have to put your trust in people. So that was a big step for me, is, managing that remote.
Did you find yourself creating maybe some more formal processes that people report to you on a periodic
Definitely.
basis with certain aspects versus just kind of walking into your Montreal office and seeing and talking?
Of course, that's when all these measures come into place, because you're trying to manage also inter-office communication. So between the two teams, networks, conference, all of these type of communication, because they are working on projects together. So that really helped, I guess, propel the business forward in a different way as well. So that was a big learning as well.
We were talking marketing before, and you can't be all things to all people. But when you're marketing to a Montreal customer base or a Toronto customer base, there's two definitely distinct cultures between the two communities.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have to distinguish yourself between them, or do you find some happy medium that really kind of one size fits all?
Well, most of our brands are national, but I find still, based on where the customer is, the culture is different. There's a different work culture. I mean, with PR too, it doesn't always shut off at 5 o'clock, and in Toronto, it might shut off closer to 8 o'clock. I mean, it's really different in terms of the work culture and the type of client base. So it hasn't really been too different for the most part, but I would say that for me, it's been more about the staffing, and the talent pool. The talent pool is very different in the two cities.
Big edge to have a foot in each solitude, so to speak, right? I mean, to understand both markets.
Both markets, yeah. It's been an amazing learning.
Now, like you say, it's building a team around you. Was it difficult to find people in Toronto? I mean, it's quite a competitive market, no question about it.
It is difficult. I think the sourcing of talent is key in a service business. I mean, it's been one of the biggest challenges, one of the biggest learnings, especially when you're delegating and, when you have managers in place. So finding the right people is critical. So, now I have taken the aid of also staffing agencies. I find there's a lot of benefit to that, also time-wise, and having their counsel. So I've been counting on that service.
What do you look for when you hire? You look for, is it they need to know the business, they need to have the right character or attitude? What do you look for when you're hiring?
It's funny, when I was recruited, a long time ago when I was working corporate, the HR person said to me, we hire within the 2 minutes of you walking into the room. And to be honest, it's so true. For me as well, it's something about the vibe. It's something about the instinctually, if someone's the right fit with the culture. It's why we get hired by clients. Ultimately, it's the fit is there. So I think the fit has to be there. And of course, there's certain top line things that you have to check off the list. It has to be there. Otherwise, they wouldn't be in the room anyway. But when it comes down to it, I think that where we say, oh, is that person a sugar? Because we're called the sugars. So is that person a sugar? So that's sort of the question.
Versus you and I, Dan, we're the milk, apparently. Now, Montreal and Toronto, as we said, the customers have different cultures, but the people are different cultures. Is it difficult to maintain one culture between the two offices, like a corporate culture, the people?
Sure. Well, I think that's when the president has to sort of intervene and kind of demonstrate the type of culture that the company has to have with each other and the type of work environment that has to be conveyed between the two offices. So I think that if ever there is that tension, which it can happen, just work style being different or in, responsibilities being different, I think that what prevails is really, the president's message to their staff on how they should be treating people.
What's your best message for an entrepreneur with a PR emergency? How do you make someone just sort of take a step back and not make a rash decision?
You mean a client or somebody who's in PR?
Yeah.
Sleep on it. I think that this urgency to respond to emails in today's culture is it's terrible. What I say to my staff, especially the junior ones, they have this urgency to respond. And I'm always like, you don't need to rush and respond. You can take some time to think about things. So I think that that's important. I think to take a step back, to put yourself maybe in, someone else's shoes, but also just to think about it. And for me, anytime I have a difficult decision, when someone calls me, because in business, you're faced with all kinds of things that come up and you might not know the answer. Every time I just sleep on it, I say, I'll get back to you. Give me 5 minutes, give me 10 minutes, give me an hour. I find the answer.
And it's managing clients' expectations. It's their crisis, but you also have to manage, all the feelings and thoughts around.
You have to think about it. Yeah.
More with Priya Chopra in a little bit. We'll have her one piece of advice for today's entrepreneur on the way. Plus, next, we'll be joined by Micheline Mayette, HR consultant at Fuller Landau, talking about brand management and how to get your employees on board.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult FL Fuller Landau, Chartered Professional Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
Inspiring stories from outstanding business people, Dan Delmar and FL Fuller Landau's Josh Miller with you. We'll have Priya Chopra, 1Milk2Sugars in just a second. She's going to give out her one piece of advice for today's entrepreneur. That's on the way. But first, Micheline Mayette joins us, HR consultant with Fuller Landau. Welcome back, Micheline.
Hi, Dan.
And so we're going to talk a bit about employee branding. Josh, we talk a lot about branding on the outside, but it's important that people sort of project a certain image and convey a message to their employees so they can be good brand ambassadors.
Well, and we were talking about that before. I mean, especially when you have different locations, Montreal, Toronto, and it touches on culture a little bit. But even before they walk into the door and as they're getting started, it's okay, what does the brand mean? What should it mean to the employee? How do I portray that? And how do I get them to eat it up, so to speak?
For sure. So really, like, if you talk about employer branding, it's a relatively new concept. I mean, been around probably for a few decades now, but it's something that more and more companies are giving some thought to. So really, right now, I mean, it could be a very competitive market, especially in certain fields. So companies want a way that they can stand out from the competition, attract candidates to the company, but not just attract candidates, really attract the right type of candidates. So, we talked a lot, the conversation was a lot around the fit. We talked about a sugar, so what is a sugar? Like, what is somebody...
Don't say that, because I want to be, I'm classified as a milk and I want to be a sugar.
Okay, you're an honorary sugar.
Oh.
Honorary.
So it's really defining what is a sugar and how are you going to attract them to the company. So you can think of, I guess, the website. What does the website say to potential candidates about your company? So how do you want to promote yourself to all these potential candidates out in the market, to make sure that they know that it's going to be a good fit for them and that's where they should be applying.
Is it also about portraying how you conduct yourself as an employer or a team environment? Are you open? Is it, an open door policy? Is it, we have, weekly meetings, or it just happens anytime where we're sharing experiences? How does that fall into?
It should really reflect the core values of the organization. Now, so it tends to happen naturally to a certain extent. So maybe a company that's very creative will create an environment that fosters creativity naturally. But some companies need to give it a little bit more thought. So really, how are we going to attract, what do we have to offer to potential candidates, and how can we put ourselves out there as being a great employer for employees that are looking for something specific? So, for example, if we think we have, great work-life balance, and that's something that we have to offer, then how do we put that out there to potential employees? So it could be through the benefits that we're talking about on the website. Now, the key is really that it's cohesive with actual practices, which I think is one thing a lot of employers are missing. They think that it's important for, to promote work-life balance. But if that's not the reality in the company, then at the end of the day, you might attract employees to your company, but they're not going to stay after. That said, there's probably other benefits that you offer. So it's really focusing on the right things to make sure that you're attracting people that are going to have a good long-term fit with the organization.
No bait and switch.
Yeah, exactly.
When you first interview, Priya, for people that you're going to hire, mm-hmm. How much do you talk about 1Milk2Sugars? How much do you kind of sell your environment?
Well, to be honest, I actually asked them what they know about 1Milk2Sugars, because for me, I want to know how invested are they in working for a small business? Because at the end of the day, I mean, we're a small business, so I want to make sure I have the right talent and I have people who really want to be there. I might not have all the bells and whistles of big companies, so the ones that actually know a lot about 1Milk2Sugars are the ones that I'm drawn to.
Today's Entrepreneur on CJAD 800. We'll have Priya Chopra's one piece of advice for today's entrepreneur next.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult FL Fuller Landau, Chartered Professional Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
Our guest this evening, Priya Chopra of 1Milk2Sugars and HR consultant Micheline Mayette from FL. Josh talking about defining that brand internally, defining it for your employees, and having them act as good ambassadors for your company.
And it's one thing to to have the words out there, you're sitting in front of them, but they're it's even before they get there. It's visuals. It's them understanding, even to the point of what do you have online? What is your website? What is your social media? Micheline, what do you see out there as maybe an example that could depict what you're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, I was looking at some key Montreal employers. The site I went for fun was like Ubisoft. How are they promoting themselves? And when you go to the career section of the Ubisoft website, it's very visual. There's a picture of two employees that are drawn on a wall, one dressed kind of, normally, and the other one dressed a little bit eccentrically. And, it's very little words, basically just says, our heroes have different characters, just like our team. So you can tell right away they're looking for people who are creative, that, are different. But if you're normal too, that's okay. So really all different types of characters.
What is normal today?
Yeah.
What's normal? Is a milk or a sugar normal? We just don't know.
And then as you continue to go through their website, it's really, I didn't see anywhere a list of all the benefits of working at Ubisoft. It was really focused on the team. So videos of the team talking about their experience, and they talk all about like the Ubisoft experience. So they're really looking for people who want to be part of that team and part of that experience, and for whom the benefits, group insurance and all that type of thing is really secondary.
And I think people use social media, whether it's a Facebook or whatever, to kind of show the environment that it's in. I mean, Priya, with 1Milk2Sugars, how do you find that experience has been?
Yeah, I find it's been really interesting. We have a mix between content that we produce for 1Milk internally, and every time we post about the internal culture or something behind the scenes or something from the office or like hot off the desk, or what is it to be working at 1Milk or to be a PR professional or social media consultant in the industry, those type of posts get the most engagement. They're the most real, they're the most connected, the most, human, if you will. But yeah, people always want to know and always can connect to that, because at the end of the day, we're working with people.
And it definitely displays culture of the firm. I mean, culture plays a huge role in anything. I mean, you're talking about employer branding. Culture's got to be huge.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's what gets people in the door. But then, one place I find a lot of companies are lacking is, okay, you can get them in the door by offering them all kinds of, goodies. But then even in the interview process, like, are the people doing the interviews representing you the way that you want to be represented? Like, so if, for example, you really focus on creativity, is your interview process creative, or is it just a standard
Practice
form that people, yeah, exactly. So I really think it has to go through all the phase, the policies, the environment. So I think there just has to be cohesive.
And I think it's also, I think people can also see right through you. They can tell if you're not genuine. They can tell whether it's from your social media post, whether it's from your interview, whether it's from. I think today that everybody is so in tune with the environment and the what they can see as genuine versus not genuine, that I have no doubt plays a huge role. So you can't fake it and sell it.
100%. Yeah.
No, I think it's huge and very important, certainly when you're hiring. Now, as we come to our last moment of the show, as we do each week, we'll turn to Priya Chopra of 1Milk2Sugars and ask you, Priya, what would be your one piece of advice for today's entrepreneur?
I think the greater the risk, the greater the reward. So I think there's a lot of people out there that are thinking to start a business, or maybe are in a business that need to make a big step. And the risk taking is such a gamble, but at the end of the day, to be honest, it's always, if you listen to your inner voice, that reward will be there, I assure you. So that would be my advice to anyone who's struggling with that question.
listen to the little voice inside your head. at least if you're a successful entrepreneur. No, I think that's great. I think it's very true. I think you have to trust your gut. I think we've heard that from many entrepreneurs. Dan, my other little takeaway that kind of was embedded in some of the discussion we had with Priya was that she realized that her role had to change as the business evolved. Her role had to evolve as well. And I think entrepreneurs that get stuck in what they started to do at the outset might not be as successful if they never get out of being stuck in that role. And I think Priya exemplified that ability to evolve as her business evolved.
Priya Chopra from 1Milk2Sugars PR, thanks so much for dropping by tonight.
Thank you, guys.
And thanks to Mishin Mayet of FL as well. Thanks, Mishin.
Thank you.
And we're back in 2 weeks.
In 3 weeks,
3 weeks.
actually, because, in 3 weeks.
All right.
After Thanksgiving.
Excellent. Join us for today's Entrepreneur 3 weeks from tonight. The Exchange with Dave Kaufman is next. Have a good night.